Right. So thank you all for being here today. I am Alicia Freeman. I'm one of the clinical professionals for TLAB, and I'm very excited to introduce our two speakers today who will be speaking on the impact of COVID-19 on lawyers, personal and professional. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Dr. Mike Claiborne. He can wave for you all. I'm sure you know who that is. Dr. Mike Claiborne brings 30 years of experience in practicing counseling psychology with individuals and couples. His approach is cognitive behavioral therapy, or some of you all may know it as CBT. Specific specialties include anxiety and stress management, chronic pain, chronic illness management, depression, substance abuse evaluations, employee assistance, and executive coaching for workplace performance and leadership. Dr. Claiborne earned his master's and doctorate degrees in counseling and psychology from Indiana University. Are you a Hoosier, Dr. Claiborne?
I am definitely a Hoosier.
Also, he is a licensed professional counselor and supervisor, a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed clinical dependency counselor, and a national certified counselor. Our next speaker is his wife and also Dr. Gail Claiborne. She has been a clinical social work and social worker, and psychotherapist for over 30 years before obtaining her master's and doctorate degree from the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work. She worked in mental health centers developing IOPs for acutely and chronically mentally ill clients. So entering her private practice in 1988, she has assisted individuals, couples, and families in resolving problems ranging from personal growth and development to problems involving serious mental illnesses. So thank you all for being here today. I am not going to take up too much of the time. I'm going to let you all, if there's more you want to say, and then also get started with your presentation.
Well, I'll start by saying thank you so much for having me. I have to give a shout out to TLAP. They are an incredible resource for the whole community of lawyers. Mike and I have had the privilege of working with them, and they've sent us clients, and they've all been great. And I think it's a measure of the respect and integrity that their office has. And I just couldn't say enough. So I just had to give a shout out to you all. And look forward to speaking with you for the next hour. Mike, did you want to say something?
I do. I just love presenting with you because you're so amazing. So thank you for doing it. So my notion is this. We have much to share today. However, I want you to think of this as not so much what we have to do, but what you need to take a look at and you can take away with you about what we say. So I often like this image of a hummingbird and a hummingbird going from flower to flower getting nectar. Use that notion of taking nectar from our presentation today that applies to you, that will maybe sweeten your life or give you some assistance or help. And then part two, the other part is maybe just kind of lay back, relax, listen, and be a sponge. Take in what really matters to you and make this personal. I mean, it's personal aspect, it's pandemic, it's COVID, but it's also professional side of how do I evolve? And we're going to go into a lot of detail of our observations from our work, but we also at the end want to hear from you. There will be a chat box and be monitored. So we do want to save some time to maybe address some specific questions. So with that, let's proceed.
Okay. So I want to emphasize that if you have questions or thoughts or comments, please just put them in the chat box and we'll be able to respond to those at the end. So, there are a lot of influences of COVID on our lives, some known, some unknown, both professional and personal. When we were first asked to give this presentation, it was a total different landscape. We were in the thick of COVID, lots of restrictions, lots of restraints. lots of closing our lives down. And as we came together to talk about what we wanted to present, we realized that now we're starting to talk about readjustment at the office, readjustment at home. What will we take and what will we leave behind in this pandemic? You know, it struck me that people are talking about their lives now. We certainly see that in our offices as before COVID hit and since COVID hit. So this has made a huge impact on all of our lives in all different kinds of ways. So most of us will probably make an easy transition back. That doesn't mean it doesn't have its bumps along the way. Maybe you won't feel any. Maybe you'll have some that are surprising to you as we readjust to life post-COVID. But I want to emphasize what Mike said, that we're just asking you to be a little mindful of this. And if I think the expectation is that we'll all just jump right back and everything will be the way it was. But of course, that's not true because change has happened. So just to be mindful of that and to have a lot of compassion for yourselves as not only we individually, but our family members, our friends, our work associates are going through all these changes. Our clients are going through all these changes as well. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, you've changed. We're supposed to, says the butterfly. And I think that's a really important thing. The one thing I know for sure is all things are changing all the time. And although we wish we could go back to some things we had before, everything is looking different. Everything, things have changed in some substantial ways that will make ripple effects for long time to come. But as we're looking at this change, we have a number of ways of responding to it. Some of us can say, this is awful. I don't like it. I want it the way it was. I want it the way it was before COVID. I wanted it so when I liked it when I worked at home all the time. And some of us can look at it as a grand adventure that we are starting something new. We don't know what it's going to be like, but with an aspiration that it will move to our good and be for our good. Okay, next slide, please. So we have a lot of unforeseen effects. I think we learned that from COVID in its lifetime. Remember when we thought we would be inside for 2 weeks and then it would be over? That was like 2 years ago. And the information that came out for us was quite unforeseen. We got some information and maybe days later we're getting different information and then days later different information. So we've all had to adjust considerably to our own responses to this information. And we all have expectations about how it's going to go. Maybe we have a vision of returning to work and how that's going to be, returning to the courthouse, returning to how you are when you're in court, how you are seeing people in person. You have an idea of how that's going to be, and it may or may not be that way. And both are fine. It's just being aware that things could be different than you expect. So I think the overriding goal is to stay flexible, to move with what's happening, and to be very gentle with yourself about your own responses and to work it out. Because I think for, high percentage of us, we're going to return to life post-COVID in a really positive way. And we'll talk about it if it's problematic for you. Okay, next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about some professional concerns or changes, implications. According to the research, law firms have maintained or increased their work. Overall, law firms haven't suffered the way that some service industries have suffered and some other industries have really felt the impact of COVID. But law firms have gone on. And in fact, for some practices of law, it's even increased. For example, insurance and employment law, all those issues around COVID, cyber security experts, as we've all so much adopted being on the web, being on Zoom, being on all these platforms that involve a lot of interaction, a lot of information going back and forth. These security experts become really critical. Unfortunately, more bankruptcies as companies have gone out of business because of COVID and the implications there. And now we have a whole new law specialty called COVID specialists, COVID-19 specialists, who are working with companies around vaccine mandates, around how to handle people who are long haulers, all kinds of implications for what COVID has brought into our arena of how people practice law. And then, of course, divorce and family law. Divorce is on the rise since COVID. Maybe we're all spending too much time together. I don't know. Those problems are coming out. And interestingly enough, and you might have input about that, it suggested that divorces are more acrimonious, that people are angrier and more revengeful and more resentful. And I don't know if that's because we've all been so secluded and kind of imploded, but I think that that makes a difference in terms of how you practice law. The other thing is that getting new talent, law firms adding attorneys to their firms has really been down. In 2020 or 2019 and 2020, there were 50% less hires than there normally are. So law firms are scrambling to get their numbers back up in terms of lawyers who are practicing. And that makes a huge amount of stress on everybody because the workload has increased. Okay. Next slide. So here are some suggestions for predictions for professionals after COVID. You may have many more. I'm sure you might. One is that business will be growing as the economy rebounds, and all kinds of businesses and new businesses. Businesses that are based out of people's homes, businesses that are about the new ways that we communicate. There are going to be a lot of negotiations over the workplace site. Will it be hybrid? Will you be required to come in? Will you continue to work from home? What will happen there? Negotiations about travel, for example, traveling for work. People have gotten really used to doing their distance meetings over Zoom. And now there may be requirements or negotiations about how much people travel. And also a readjustment to in-person workplace. So we all know that women, thank you, Michelle, for this suggestion, have really borne the brunt, as is typical, but not necessarily the whole load of caregiving for their kids, caregiving for their parents. And because of the restrictions of COVID, that has placed a lot of pressure on them, of course. And they now are starting to readjust to things going back, kids going back to school, daycare, working with elderly parents, being in facilities or needing extra care that can now happen. Also, the adjustment to the workplace. I'm hearing it both ways. Wow, it was so great to see my friends again and catch up and have lunch with them in the cafeteria. And then I had somebody say to me just this week, I can't believe I'm back at work. People are talking to me so much, I can't get anything done. And I was so used to being at home, taking it easy, working hard, but on my own schedule. No transportation. I didn't have to drive to work. I didn't have traffic. It was a total different experience. So all those things are adjustments as we move back after COVID. Okay, slide. we have to reevaluate our work-life balance. We've given a million talks about work-life balance, and it becomes critical for attorneys because the demands of being an attorney are great, and to maintain that balance can be very challenging. And it would be easy to re-enter a world of fast-paced, demanding activity, just like go pre-COVID. But I think that might be one of the things that's changing. People have gotten used to spending more time with their families. They've gotten used to having more free time. And I think that will make some impact on the practice of law after we all come back. Also, there might be some PTSD. The P stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And that means after you get back to things, you might notice that you're having some kind of response that's unexpected. Maybe more anxiety, maybe a feeling of sadness or depression. These are probably pretty typical responses to setting up something new and returning to negotiating all these things about your new personal and professional life. Okay, next.
So that's me. So I would like to even comment on what you just said, Gail, about the PTSD, because there's been a cumulative impact over the past 2 years of things that many people have felt very out of control with. For example, there have been family members die and haven't been able to attend funerals, or people being in the hospital having surgeries and not being able to participate or have babies. There's a cumulative impact of these stressors that have to be acknowledged, addressed, or dealt with also, that are going to come up. So expect to have some of that, depending on what you've been through, what you've experienced, and what really grief or stressors haven't really been taken care of, which is kind of what I want to lean into here a little bit. It's sort of the downside of what we're looking at is impact on us personally, which is a third of adults exhibiting signs of generalized anxiety disorder. In fact, calls to suicide centers, suicide control centers have gone up 300%. There have been increases in prescription medication over 30 to 40% for anxiety and depression. So a quarter of adults are really exhibiting, these are new adults that haven't had previous coexisting problems with anxiety or depression are now showing up. Use of alcohol has increased significantly. Treatment centers have been full. There have been just so much of an increase of people being alone and then trying to self-soothe with alcohol, stress, sleep problems. And so this creates a whole entity and problem in unto itself. So people overall have been avoiding necessary medical appointments. I see this patient who has asthma. So she hasn't been able to go outside of air quality. She has postponed her colonoscopy. She hasn't been to her, she has major lung problems, hasn't been to her pulmonologist. She's just beginning. In fact, next week is her first allergy appointment to start working with their allergist. So people are starting to kick in and catch up. So think for yourself. Am I experiencing some anxiety? What's it look like? How is it showing up? If I have depression, what is my mood? How is that showing up in my sleep, in my attitude, my irritability? Am I using or abusing substances of any kind? Have I been complying with my medications? What have I been putting off that I need to now take hold and take control? Inability to exercise and go to get out and break away and work off some of the physical stress. I mentioned the suicide hotline calls. The increases have been just astounding during the pandemic. And that, unfortunately, physical abuse, marital discord, relating to what Gail mentioned about increases in divorce, physical abuse and marital discord has really risen because what? More people connected more closely together, less time apart. And if there were problems already, then these were exacerbated. And so there are remedies, there are ways to deal with this, but people need help, instruction, and skills, and acknowledge what's going on.
I
So-
do have a quick question for you all.
Yeah.
You all mentioned adjustment and PTSD. So we know we live in a technology world where this information, they can go Google a definition and say, oh, this is what I have. So can you all talk a little bit about a person that is struggling to adjust or readjust into going back into this norm, as we call it, versus a person who is actually experiencing symptoms of PTSD?
Okay, I can speak to that. Okay, Mike?
Please.
Okay, so PTSD means post-traumatic stress disorder. It originally was for people who faced huge life-threatening traumas, like you were held at gunpoint or you were in a war or some terrible thing happened to you. But the definition has broadened a lot. And we have traumas in our lives, all of us do, and some greater and some lesser. So what happens is after that event happens, and I think for some of us, we can name things that happened during our COVID experience that might have been traumatic. Afterwards, we start having symptoms. Some of those symptoms might be increased anxiety, a feeling of wanting to resist going back, an avoidance, or having memories of those stressful, traumatic things, avoiding a situation in which you might have the same feelings. All those kind of things are symptoms of PTSD. And again, I want to say, that's kind of on a spectrum. So you might have small amounts of increases in those, and you could call it PTSD or something really much more severe, depending on what's happened and your own response. Was that good, Alicia?
That was great. Can you talk a little bit about what it would look like for someone who's struggling to adjust, the readjustment piece that you mentioned as well?
That's having trouble adjusting?
Yes, and going back into the workplace.
What I'm seeing is that people, some people, it feels like to me, have gotten a bit stuck in their fear about COVID. Even though they've taken all the precautions, the numbers are down, they've been vaccinated and boosted, still very, very fearful, kind of gotten like their brains kind of got stuck. At one point, that was a good idea to isolate. And now we're starting, even Dr. Fauci says it's time to start looking at coming out of it. This really is ending, I think, or it will. And just, I like to say that being an optimist during this time has been very challenging because so much bad news has come out. And when we think it's over, it's not over. And I think people are having difficulty adjusting to going back to thinking it's safe, to wanting to leave the patterns that they have developed and resisting those changes. We're hearing about a lot of people leaving their job because while they were home evaluating it or getting burned out, if they were in the medical field, they're leaving their work. So that's another response, stress response, and an inability to readapt or difficulty in readapting. Yeah.
And I would add, Alicia, sleep disturbance, their irritability, disconnecting, isolating, starting to withdraw, not wanting to do things. And again, I think this slide really speaks to that in some respects, that over the last 2 years, there has been a profound sense of uncertainty and loss of control over our lives. And what used to make us feel comfortable, we could distract ourselves with football or who knows whatever you enjoy, but there have been tremendous losses. The loss of sense of control has really been so prominent, so that if you watch the news, which I don't recommend too much of, I give myself 3 main minutes a day on the Today Show and say, okay, now I know what's happening. I don't want to be influenced anymore because that will impact me even more. And, we got in, I think many people got into this FOMO, fear of missing out or fear of the future and fear in general, which then, what does that do? It raises heart rate, blood pressure, it impacts our immune system. And this cortisol rise of these stress hormones over time weakens us. And so then everything goes down, focus of attention, memory. We tend to overeat or undereat or just get negative. So what we want to do is help you face what the negative consequences are, look at the demands that are ahead of you, and think about, how do I understand what I've lost and what do I want to create now? Like, what's my new version of myself that I want to develop as a result of all that has happened? And I'm going to speak more about this, and that's why this slide's in here. First, the bad news, silver bullet. There is no simple or seemingly magical solution to this very complicated problem. We have to realize that there are multiple dimensions, aspects, people, components, financial, emotional, social, medical, that all correlate. It's a confluence happening. So we really have to think, no silver bullet, no magic pill. This is multi-layer, multi-dimensional, and will require really some devotion and dedication to finding new ways of being that will be an evolution. I don't know if you notice this, I pay attention to these crazy things. Over the last couple of years of Zoom, I've noticed that the platform is updated probably 50 to 75 times. Bugs and fixes. Well, use that in your own life. What bugs and fixes, what operating system updates and upgrades do I need to make to help me function and perform better? So part of doing this perhaps is for you to rate yourself, even right now, inwardly. Think on the 0 to 10 scale. How well do I feel? How unwell do I feel? What is my number? So that, again, you do some self-assessment and maybe ask your partner, maybe ask a good friend, how do you see me functioning? I have this truth but verify. Like, you may truthfully think you're an 8, but if you verify with a partner, no, you're about a 2, well, then you've got some recalibrating to do. So think about inwardly looking at these factors about how well adjusted you feel and how well you've managed this time. And then check it out with some people close to you that you trust or love, or and you'll see this later, get to a professional to help you get an objective way to take a look at this. So these are some of the personal side components that I think are worthwhile for you to be looking at on that wellness scale. Emotionally, how well do I feel? Where am I with my work career aspects of my progress? Physically, my weight, my strength, my endurance, what am I doing to better myself? Financially, what have I taken a look at that I need to do some planning on? What have I avoided? Have I done my wills? And have I updated things? And taking time to really assess this. Socially, have I disconnected? Have I connected? Have I avoided? I used to make this joke. I don't think it's really a joke anymore. So much about how Introverts loved the pandemic because they weren't forced to go out and have to socialize because it was hard on them. But that also took a toll. So reaching out to people isolated, friends, maybe people that are single, or reaching out for yourself, saying, hey, I need some help. Or are you pursuing your own spiritual needs? What's happening with your family structure? I saw someone earlier today. I said, well, leaving today, here's your acronym, FAF. You need to work on fun. You need to activate yourself, and you need to be more flexible in your life. You've been way too structured and rigid, and it's really cost you. And then lastly, what about your work-life balance? What are you doing to really give yourself a sense of balance? In fact, this is kind of sad. No, it's very sad. I asked this person also today in a session, give me a ratio of your happiness in your marriage, in your relationship. Out of 100%, give me a positive to negative ratio. And here was the comment. Well, 20% good, 80% bad. Well, this is an opportunity. It's a problem and it's an opportunity.
So I want to speak about how important support is. That's something that has really been interrupted during COVID. People who are practicing law, who are used to having their social life in the office, at the courthouse, saying hi to judges, to other lawyers. This has really been interrupted. And although we're going day to day on this, I think it would be easy to forget how important those kinds of social connections really are. And the other thing that has happened is that the ways that we re-regulate have also been taken away from us, for most of us anyhow. Those being going out and having fun at a party, going to a concert, traveling. So many of us travel as a way to get away from it all and relax. All those things have been diminished in our lives. So those sorts of re-regulation mechanisms have not been available to us. So support is really crucial. So while you're at home every day on Zoom, day in, day out, these small interactions that you have with people are really, really important. I take a class, I'm learning French, and we were on Zoom for 2 years. And what I really missed were the conversations as we're walking out of the building to go to our cars, conversations about how the class is going or what we're doing regarding learning. And all of that got all curtailed. So I think it's important just to acknowledge that the pandemic did take a toll on us, creating anxiety and fear. And many people feel overwhelmed by the challenges of work and family, and they should. It's been incredibly overwhelming. I don't know how women have done it who have small kids, and men, fathers and mothers who have small kids. They're doing school, they're doing their full-time job, they're taking care of their family space. It's really, really incredible. So it's really important to stay connected to your friends, your coworkers, and communicate with them about what's happening. And I suggest to you all to communicate about how it is to be practicing law, how that is different. And I think that's exactly what diminishes the sense of loneliness and isolation. And also explore the resources that are available to you. TLAP, as I mentioned, is a really outstanding one. Other kinds of counseling, your employee assistance program, whatever's available to you. Okay.
We do have one question. It was from Claire. She said, what about people who still have reason to be fearful, such as immunocompromised people?
Yeah.
What would you tell them about how to go back to work in other places if they have to or cannot work from home?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. I think that has to be negotiated with what your doctor thinks and what your employer thinks. So you need to have frank conversations with your employer about that. Maybe if you felt comfortable enough just staying masked up, masks really seem to be very effective. Maybe it would be having a larger hybrid so that you're spending more time at home. What really is essential for you to be in the office? And I think that that's a really great question and a really legitimate one. There are a lot of people who might have some difficulties. And I would say to also remember, what did I do when it was cold and flu season? Because COVID will get to that. I don't know how long that's going to take, but what were the ways that I already accommodated my own health challenges? And is there anything there that I might incorporate now? Is that a good answer? Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So I want to talk about the study by Oracle and Workplace Intelligence. Countries have found the following, that 78% of the global workforce reported negative impacts to their mental health in 2020, 78 worldwide. 41% say they are challenged because there's less distinction between their work life and home life. 40% report an increase in decision-making. They feel they're making poor decisions. 38% are experiencing more stress, and 35% are experiencing a lack of work-life balance that we've been talking about. So we all hope that we'll be able to adjust easily. I think for the most part that probably will happen, and that we have to remember how really resilient human beings are. And if you're not feeling that, if you're struggling with your response, there's nothing wrong with that. We're all kind of wired differently, and sometimes it takes people a little longer to adjust, or they need to make special evaluations about what they need to do. Nothing wrong with that. But I also want to say we're talking about a lot of things that can happen, and I want to be positive and say most of us will figure out a way to adjust. And that doesn't mean perfectly. That means in whatever way that we can.
And I'll add where I started this webinar, which is looking at yourself. Which one of these elements apply to you? Let you realize maybe you're not alone, for one, and two, that these are common impacts of stress over time of what this pandemic has done to confuse us, make us anxious, make us depressed, and drive us inward and away from how we have lived our lives. So I'll do this slide rather quickly because, again, looking inward, look at your own signs of emotional distress. I'll have some clients say, yeah, my kids say that I'm more irritable or I'm more short. There are personality changes. You may be uncharacteristically angry or anxious, and this is leaking out of you because of this long-term stress. You may find yourself not speaking up. That was another client this morning. First thing he said to me is, my wife says, well, I never talk to her. I don't really let her know what's going on with me. We spend time rehearsing, role-playing what he should say, how he addresses it, because he doesn't know what to say or even how to talk about what's going on with him. Well, he is a man, which isn't great because they're not so good at it. Can use help. So have you neglected self-care? Have you gained weight? Have you lost your way in terms of your kind of spiritual guidance? Do you notice yourself feeling a little hopeless or overwhelmed by everything going on? So again, looking at sleep disturbance, loss of control, things I've mentioned before. Again, check the ones that apply to you to give you some idea about how to proceed. This is a slide on things to avoid. So one, if you're spending too much time on social media and the news as a way to distract yourself or soothe yourself, it's probably making you more stressed and not helpful. Rehashing with a friend all the things that are wrong, problems, worries, it actually activates your neurons and receptors to make you more anxious, depressed, or stressed. Don't feed your demons. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit from an internal dialogue, self-talk standpoint. Consuming large amounts of caffeine, sugar to pump you up because you're tired, you're not sleeping, that only makes things worse in the curve of crash, ruining your energy even more. Again, avoiding large amounts of alcohol, recreational drugs have, again, longer lasting impact and probably other detrimental effects. Unloading your anger, frustration. I kind of cringe every day when I see this road rage stuff happening and there's people with these shots fired. So looking at containing your anger, how do you learn to self-soothe? Again, I'll talk about that more in a moment. But yeah, looking at how you're treating others. Are you smiling? Are you attempting to bring positive energy to what you're doing with coworkers, with court staff, with people when you're checking out at the grocery store? Bring something positive to it if you can.
So I'm going to speak quickly about this so we have enough time for the questions. So here's what helps. Therapy can help. Of course, we would say that. Exercise, exercising regularly, social support that I mentioned, friends, family, people that might understand where you're coming from. Be sure to get enough sleep. I am amazed what a miracle sleep can be. Do things that reduce your stress. Have a lot of fun. Fun is the antidote to depression. And find ways to challenge yourself, learn something new, feel excited about doing something, maybe plan a trip now. We're getting so we can do that. Maybe practice mindfulness and meditation as a way to calm your mind. And of course, medication is always available if you need it for anxiety or depression. Next slide, please. The Buddhists have this wonderful concept called equanimity. It's mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. So this is the way I like to explain it. You know, when you're in the ocean and you're having fun, having the waves hit you, you know, and you're waiting for another wave and the wave hits you and you and the kids, you know, laugh and roll with it, and then it calms and then another wave comes. It's even fun. That's kind of equanimity. You know, you're standing up to the difficulties of life with a kind of calmness. That doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you don't have feelings. It means you develop a confidence that you can get through all these things, which I'm imagining many of you already have. This idea that you've done hard things, things have been troublesome, but you've gotten through it and you've gotten through it okay. And it's a good thing to remember.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
So this slide is up for a reason. Like many of us, I think, have lost our way to happiness, but it is a climb. Many people on my intake, I ask, goals at the end, like, what do you want to accomplish coming here? And they say, well, I want to be happy. I said, well, I really can't write that down because I feel happiness is a byproduct. And this is the APA, American Psychological Association definition of the happiness formula. Meaning plus engagement plus pleasure equals happiness. So again, looking inward, what do I have in my life that gives me meaning? My family, my friends, my spiritual life, my exercise, my volunteer work, my work itself. Am I engaged in those activities that I love? And two, do I know how to derive pleasure? Do I validate and value those things when I actually have them? So again, seeking happiness, looking is a climb, it's work, and you have to invest if you're going to get there.
So when you when should you consider therapy? So, what Mike and I do, and lots of other therapists do, is we make this really safe place to express whatever you want without judgment, to help you set goals, personal and professional, and help you find healthy coping mechanisms for whatever your life challenge is, and to help you improve your relationship with yourself and others. And if there have been traumas or other bad decisions that you've made, to help you work through those and find a different way. I think Mike's going to be talking about how we think about things. Sometimes therapists, particularly the kind of work that Mike and I do, it's about looking at your negative thoughts and really evaluating how those are working for you, how true they are, what you could reframe them to that would be more healthful, provide more happiness. So those are the kind of reasons that you might want to see a therapist.
And to that point, exactly, the voices are back, Doc, with a heap of discouraging words. So this is a CBT commercial in a way. So I want you to imagine a triangle for a moment. At the top are negative thoughts. In this corner are the emotions generated by those negative thoughts. In this corner of the triangle is the actions or behaviors as a result. And that becomes an unconscious automatic cycle with negative thinking. CBT teaches you how to reframe and flip that around so that the thoughts become positive at the top of the triangle, to change the emotion, to change the outcomes and behaviors you engage in. And so, going back to that other notion of we've lost control, we felt helpless, controlling our prefrontal cortex and our thinking process is where we can take some control. And so learning how to do that, and there are some very good apps out there, resources, programs, therapists that can help you along the way with this.
So Abraham Lincoln said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. It would be a shame to think that the only thing we get out of COVID is that it's over. I think that there might be somewhere in there some silver linings about what we've learned about ourselves, about what we've learned about what we want in our life, our personal strengths, our personal flexibility, and a chance to really reevaluate work and life balance, work and pleasure, work and outside of work. Yeah, that's good. Can we go to the next slide? I want to say we cannot overstate how much the practice of law is changing and will change because of COVID, and the implications, we don't even know all of those yet, I'm sure. And as we have learned in the last 2 years, we're learning as we go and things are evolving. And I guess one of the messages I want to say is be open to that and flexible with it. I think that's the best bet for surviving successfully, and better than just getting over it. It's making it more fruitful for your life.
I was seeing someone yesterday that on his desk, he just suffered a very tragic loss of a close friend. And he says, he read me a quote that he looks at on his desk every day. And he says, every day comes once in a lifetime. So focus on making this the best day you can, and be well. If you have troubles and you talk about them to people you trust and love, just getting some empathy and some connection and allowing yourself to be vulnerable will help you move forward and start to let go and deal with things rather than repress, push down, not feel, and avoid. So the journey is improved as you engage in it and really tackle your own fears or vulnerability or difficulties. This is how you get smoother sailing.
So we just want to thank you so much. And we're going to go to questions now.
Yes. Well, first off, thank you all for such a great presentation. We do have one question in the chat. It says, how do you recover mentally after having COVID? Even after taking all precautions, if you find it a struggle to mentally concentrate?
As a response to COVID?
Yes.
Is a symptom?
I'm assuming, and they can send me a message directly to clarify that question.
You know, that really is a medical question and a serious one, because the kind of long hauler symptom that I think is being described is a real mystery, and a lot of research is happening about that. And from a psychological point of view, I think it may just be physical and a response to the COVID virus, but it also could be worth looking at. Is there any anxiety and depression in that's keeping you from being able to focus? Is there any other kind of psychological structure that is contributing to that? So sometimes, foggy thinking, it covers a lot of different things. So I think you'll have to sort out which is which. Yeah, and good luck on that.
And how could you not have an emotional reaction to having COVID?
That's right.
I mean, it's scary, and bad things have happened to people who've had it now. Hopefully, you don't have some of those long haul problems and difficulties. But I think the idea is address the physical concerns, as Gail said, but also make sure you're addressing your emotional concerns and have some way to self-soothe, process, clear, accept, let go, find some ways to put yourself at ease, and find really ultimately some gratitude, perhaps, of that you're still here, and now what do I want to do with this life I have?
Absolutely. We also have a comment that says, all this information is very helpful. It is getting me to sit with the questions of what happened over the last 2 years and how to navigate what is happening now and the transition. Thank you to both of you for being informative and also presenting it in a kind and gentle way.
Oh, that is lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
That is lovely. Kayla, you were outstanding.
So were you, Mike. Wow.
I see why I married you. You're so good.
I was having the same thought, Mike.
Well, we hope this helped a lot.
Wait, we might have more questions. Are there more questions? Yeah.
If there's any other questions, you can put it in the chat. I'm not seeing anything at this current moment.
Okay.
For those of you all who are still here, I did put the CLE number in the chat so that you can claim credit for this presentation. Michelle, I see you unmuted yourself. Alice said, please repeat the quote from the client's desk. They want to write it down. Did I write? No, I wrote down the Abraham Lincoln one.
All right, just a second. Yeah. Each day comes once in a lifetime. Each day comes once in a lifetime.
We have another question. What books do you recommend to help self-soothe yourself emotionally?
I would say a really good one, but you'll be learning. I don't know if it's a way of looking at your thinking, would be Feeling Great by David Burns. That's a new book about his cognitive behavioral practices. And a lot of times people will read the book and feel totally satisfied and not need to go on to see a therapist, which is great too. Also, I like to read things like Pema Chodron's When Things Fall Apart, about how to navigate tough things. I think there's a lot of really inspirational things to read, quotes. Your religious tradition, if you are a person of faith, to read those things, the Bible, whatever your particular religious documents are, teachings are.
I would also say, and I talked about self-soothing, I would say there are some really excellent apps out there for guided meditation, calm breath, calming yourself, these sounds. Anyway, there are a lot of really good apps out there that you could use for mini breaks to help you center, calm yourself, and just reduce your stress.
I just saw today that Pink developed part of an app for the app Calm,
Mm.
and it's to help kids go to sleep.
Mm.
So if you have kids that won't go to sleep, it's something to consider. Yeah.
I think
You know,
Matthew McConaughey also tells some good night stories on
Oh,
call.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's great.
Now
You know
we
what-
just need one for dogs, right?
right. So I have two other thoughts. One is, if you in a law firm, I had someone that I met from TLAP a while back that there were some really tragic things happened within the law firm with suicide, and he got right into counseling. The law firm took up the reins and started having these presentations and programs for them. And even in one of the moments of the seminar, a colleague said something, geez, I feel the same way, or I feel terrible. He said, well, he just self-disclosed. I got into therapy, it really helped me, and put it out there. So reducing stigma about getting help, opening up, what is your company doing? What are you asking them to do? What are the stressors? I think are relevant. And then second comment I want to make is check your own energy with your kids, your family, or what. Like if you're stressed, upset, and anxious, you're carrying that. You got to get that self-calming, soothing energy moving from you out, not just to bring some outside in, but inside out.
Absolutely.
That's all I got to say about that.
Those are two great tips. Absolutely. Michelle, did you want to say anything? I saw that you unmuted yourself earlier.
Oh, I was, that reminded me when you were talking about dogs, of Erica has a plaque on her desk that says, "My therapist has a wet nose." Being with our pets is a really nice,
Yeah.
way to get in.
Yeah.
And I also, as much as I have gone through ups and downs during COVID, I like to I call it the bright spots of COVID. Things like some of the Zoom meetings that we do, I get, as a speaker, I get more energy out of being in person, but
Mhm.
people from far away can
Mhm.
participate. People who are on this presentation who couldn't take the time, so, and then also video therapy or phone therapy is, it's made therapy a lot more accessible to a lot more
Mhm.
people. So,
Right.
I'm so glad you said that. I really am, because that's so true. I was thinking about that we wouldn't be able to have this presentation in the same way without this, our facility with these platforms now. Yeah, thanks
So
for saying that.
we're coming out, we're moving forward. Get more positive in your head, how you approach things, and really start thinking about who am I? How do I want to live moving forward based on all this that's happened to me? That's that. Oh, I can't keep talking. The great resignation that you've seen on the news is, to me, the great reevaluation. And that's what this talk is about.
That's exactly what I was thinking about when we all.
Thank you, Alicia. I'm glad you-
I was thinking about that because my husband and I were just talking about how they say that the unemployment rate has decreased, and yet people are leaving their jobs at a higher rate. So they're starting to work for themselves. They're starting to recognize that I need more time, but I also
Yeah.
need work-life balance.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, thank you for this.
Thank you for giving us the
Thank you all
opportunity.
so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is a great presentation. And for those of you all who are still here, like I said, I put the CLE number in the chat. I can drop it in there one more time. But thank you all again. This is such a great presentation. I think we all learned something today. Even if we leave with just a quote, that's something that we can use, right? To self-evaluate. So
Yeah.
this is amazing. And then they said that these TLAP presentations are a huge perk for COVID. So this is great.
Yay. Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you, guys.
Very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
You too. Great seeing you.
Great seeing you. Too. Hopefully, I'll see you in person one day, right?
Oh,
I hope so.
yeah, that could happen. Yeah, I look better in person. Bye.
I look
Bye.
better, no? Well, my computer.